Captain Jake Morrison stared at the screen in front of him. The numbers did not make sense. His ship, the UES Pathfinder, had been exploring the outer edges of human space for 3 months. They were looking for new planets that humans could live on. Instead, they found something that should not exist. "Captain, you need to see this," said Dr. Lisa Grant. She was the ship's expert on old alien things. Her face was pale and her hands shook a little. "The signal is coming from inside that asteroid field." Jake looked at the main screen. The asteroid field looked normal. Big rocks floating in space, nothing special. But the scanners were picking up something metal. Something huge. Something that had been there for a very long time. "How long?" Jake asked. "The computer says at least 50,000 years, Lisa replied. "Maybe longer. The metal is so old that it has become part of the rock around it." Chief Engineer Pete Collins walked onto the bridge. His uniform was dirty from working in the engine room. "Captain, I have been looking at the energy readings. Whatever is in there, it is still powered. Not much, but something is still running after all this time." Jake felt a chill run down his back. Nothing stayed powered for 50,000 years. Human technology barely lasted 100 years without maintenance. "Are you sure about those numbers?" "I checked them 3 times, Pete said. The energy signature is weak, but it is there. And Captain, there is something else. The energy pattern looks familiar. It is similar to our own power systems, but much more advanced." Lisa moved to her station and started typing. "I am scanning deeper into the asteroid field. Captain, there are multiple objects in there. They are all metal. They are all very old. And they are all huge." The main screen changed to show a detailed scan of the asteroid field. What they saw made everyone on the bridge go quiet. Hidden inside the rocks were shapes that looked like ships. But these ships were bigger than anything humans had ever built. The largest one was 10 times the size of their own ship. "Get us closer," Jake ordered. "But be careful. If these things are still powered, they might have defenses." The Pathfinder moved slowly toward the asteroid field. As they got closer, the scanners picked up more details. The ships were not just big. They were beautiful. Their hulls had smooth curves and elegant lines. They looked like they had been built by artists, not engineers. "Captain," Lisa said, her voice barely above a whisper, "I am picking up markings on the hull of the largest ship. They look like writing. Can you read it?" "I am trying. The computer is comparing it to known languages." Lisa paused, staring at her screen. "Captain, this cannot be right. The computer says it is an old form of Standard Terran, our own language." Jake felt his heart start beating faster. Standard Terran was the language that all humans spoke. It had been the same for thousands of years. How could there be an older form of it on a ship that was 50,000 years old? "Put it on the main screen," Jake ordered. The writing appeared on the screen. It was clearly human writing, but it looked ancient, like something from old history. Books. Lisa worked at her station and slowly the computer translated the words. "Terra's Wrath," Lisa read out loud. "That is the name of the ship." Pete looked at the captain. "Terra is the old name for Earth." "But Captain, humans have only been in space for 500 years. How can there be a human ship that is 50,000 years old?" Before Jake could answer, the communications officer spoke up. "Captain, I am getting a message from Earth Command. It is marked urgent. Put it through." Admiral Kate Sullivan appeared on the screen. She looked worried. "Captain Morrison, we need you to stop what you are doing right now. We are getting reports from all over human space. Ships like the one you found are being discovered everywhere. And Captain, we are getting messages from the Galactic Council. The aliens are very upset about these discoveries." Jake looked at his crew. "Admiral, what kind of messages?" "The Hegemony Empire is demanding that we stop all exploration in these areas. They want us to turn over any artifacts we find to them. Captain, they sound scared. I have never heard aliens sound scared before." The Hegemony Empire ruled most of the galaxy. They had 12 different alien species working together. They had technology that was much better than human technology. They had never been afraid of anything that humans did. "Admiral, we need to study this ship. It might be important." "I agree, Captain. But be very careful. If the Hegemony is scared of these ships, then they must be very dangerous. Send me everything you find. And Captain, if you see any Hegemony ships coming your way, run. The communication ended. Jake looked at his crew. They were all staring at him, waiting for orders. Lisa, I want you to take a team over to that ship. Find out everything you can. Pete, I want you to see if you can get more power to their systems. Maybe we can learn more if we can turn on their computers. Captain, is it safe? Lisa asked. Probably not. But if the hegemony wants these ships, then we need to know why. Take weapons and stay in contact at all times. 2 hours later, Lisa and her team were floating in space next to the ancient ship. Up close, it was even more impressive. The hull was made of metal that they had never seen before. It was black, but it seemed to have light moving under the surface. There is an airlock here, said one of the team members. It looks like it will fit our equipment. They connected their gear to the ship's airlock. To their surprise, it opened easily. The ship's computers seemed to recognize their equipment, as if it had been waiting for them. Inside the ship, emergency lights came on. The air was clean and breathable. Everything looked like it had been built yesterday, not 50,000 years ago. This is impossible, Lisa said into her radio. Captain, this ship is in perfect condition. It is like time stopped inside here. They moved through the ship's corridors. Everything was built for humans. The doors were the right height. The controls were where human hands could reach them. The writing on the walls was in that same ancient form of standard Terran. In the ship's main computer room, Pete was working on getting power to the systems. I found the main power source, he reported. Captain, this technology is incredible. I do not understand how it works, but it is still producing power after all this time. Can you access their computers? I'm trying. There we go. Captain, the computers are coming online. There is a lot of information here. Years' worth of data. On the Pathfinder, Jake watched as data began flowing from the ancient ship to their computers. Ship logs, star charts, technical manuals, all of it in that ancient human language. Captain, Lisa called from inside the ship. You need to see this. I found their bridge. And Captain, there are pictures here. Pictures of humans. But they are wearing uniforms that I have never seen before. And the star charts show thousands of human colonies. Thousands of worlds that we have never heard of. Jake felt like the universe had just turned upside down. If these records were real, then human history was completely wrong. Humans had not started exploring space 500 years ago. They had been in space for tens of thousands of years. Lisa, get back to the ship now. Bring everything you can carry. Pete, download as much data as you can. Captain, why the rush? Because if the hegemony finds out what we have discovered, they will do everything they can to stop us from learning more. And I have a feeling that this is just the beginning. As the team returned to the Pathfinder, Jake looked at the ancient ship one more time. Terra's wrath. Humanity's wrath. What had humans been so angry about 50,000 years ago? And why? Had the galaxy forgotten that humans had once been here before? He was about to find out that some secrets were kept hidden for very good reasons. Dr. Lisa Grant had not slept in 2 days. The data from Terra's wrath was incredible, but also frightening. Every file she opened changed what she thought she knew about human history. The ancient ship's computers held records that went back 50,000 years. Records of a human empire that had ruled thousands of worlds. Captain, she called to Jake Morrison, who was standing behind her chair. Look at this star map. These red dots are human colonies from the ancient empire. There are over 3,000 of them. Jake stared at the map. Most of the red dots were in areas of space that were now controlled by alien species. Some were in hegemony space. Are you sure these records are real? I ran every test I could think of. The data is real. The dates are real. Captain, humans did not start in space 500 years ago. We have been in space for over 50,000 years. We had an empire that was bigger than the hegemony. Pete Collins looked up from his workstation. He had been trying to understand the ancient ship's technology. Captain, I have been studying their engine designs. These ships could travel faster than anything we have today. They could cross the galaxy in weeks instead of years. How is that possible? I do not know. The technology is so advanced that I can barely understand the basic principles. It is like giving a computer to someone from the Stone Age. They know it does something, but they have no idea how. Lisa pulled up another file on her screen. Captain, listen to this. It is from the ship's log, dated about 50,000 years ago. She cleared her throat and began to read the translation. The Devourers have consumed the Rigel system. All 17 worlds are gone. Nothing remains but empty space. The Defense Council has approved the construction of the Deep Sleep Fleet. If we cannot stop them, we must ensure that some part of humanity survives. The bridge went quiet. Jake felt cold. What are the Devourers? I do not know yet, but they are mentioned in hundreds of files. Whatever they were, the ancient humans were very afraid of them, afraid enough to build weapons that could destroy planets. On Earth, Dr. Ben Rogers was having his own shocking discoveries. He worked in a museum, studying ancient human history. For years, he had wondered why so many human cultures had similar myths about lost civilizations and great floods. Now, after reading the reports from the Pathfinder, everything was starting to make sense. He sat in his office, surrounded by old books and artifacts. On his desk was a translation of an ancient Sumerian text that talked about gods who came from the stars. Next to it was a Mayan carving that showed flying ships. On his computer screen was the report from Terra's Wrath. It is all connected, he said to his assistant, Dr. Carol White. The myths, the legends, the stories that every human culture tells about lost civilizations, they are not myths. They are memories. What do you mean? Think about it. Every human culture on Earth has stories about a great civilization that was destroyed. Atlantis, Lemuria, the Tower of Babel. What if these are not different stories? What if they are all memories of the same thing? The fall of the first human empire. Carol looked at the ancient texts on his desk. But how could people remember something from 50,000 years ago? I do not know. But look at this. Ben showed her a page from an old Celtic myth. This story talks about people who came from the stars and taught humans how to build cities. Then one day, they left, and humans forgot how to build great things. The story says that one day the star people will return. Meanwhile, back on the Pathfinder, Pete was working on something that should have been impossible. He was trying to activate more of Terra's Wrath systems. The ship had been sleeping for 50,000 years, but its computers were still working. More importantly, they seemed to recognize human genetic patterns. Captain, you need to see this, Pete called out. I connected our computer systems to the ancient ship. When I did, something amazing happened. The ship started building things. Jake hurried to Pete's station. On the screen, he could see the asteroid field around Terra's Wrath. But now, there, were new things moving in the darkness. Machines floating in space, working on something. What are they building? I think they are building more ships. The ancient ship has construction machines that have been sleeping. When they detected our presence, they woke up and started following old orders. Lisa looked up from her work. That explains something I found in the records. The ancient humans built their ships to be self-repairing and self-building. If something happened to the Empire, the ships were supposed to rebuild it. Jake watched the machines working in space. They moved with purpose, like they knew exactly what they were doing. How long until they finish? At this rate, maybe a few weeks. Captain, these machines are building ships that are bigger and more advanced than anything in the galaxy today. The peaceful work was interrupted by an alarm. The communications officer looked up from his station with fear in his eyes. Captain, I am detecting ships approaching, a lot of ships. Human ships? No, sir. Alien ships. It looks like a hegemony battle fleet. They are still far away, but they are heading straight for us. Jake felt his heart sink. The hegemony had found them. How many ships? I count at least 50 capital ships and over 200 smaller vessels. Captain, this is not a patrol. This is an invasion fleet. Admiral Kate Sullivan's voice came over the communication system. All human ships in the outer sectors, this is Admiral Sullivan. We are receiving reports that hegemony fleets are moving toward all locations where ancient ships have been found. They are not responding to our communication attempts. All captains are ordered to defend these sites at all costs. Jake looked at his crew. The Pathfinder was an exploration ship, not a warship. They had no chance against a hegemony battle fleet, but as he watched the ancient machines working in space, he had an idea. "Pete, can you wake up more systems on Terra's Wrath?" "I can try." "Why?" "Because if that ship is 50,000 years old and still working, it might have defenses that are still working too." Pete worked frantically at his station. On the screen, they could see more lights coming on inside the ancient ship. Systems that had been sleeping for thousands of years were waking up. "Captain, I am getting readings from all over the asteroid field. There are not just ships here. There are defense platforms, weapons that have been hidden in the rocks." "Are they functional?" "I think so. The energy readings are increasing. It is like the whole asteroid field is waking up." The hegemony fleet was still hours away, but already the ancient defenses were responding to their approach. Hidden weapons platforms emerged from asteroids where they had been camouflaged for 50,000 years. Ancient guardian ships, smaller than Terra's Wrath but still larger than modern human vessels, began piling themselves up. Lisa made another discovery in the ship's records. "Captain, I found something about the defense systems. They are programmed to protect human life above everything else. They will attack anything that threatens humans even if humans order them not to." "What does that mean?" "It means that these weapons are not under our control. They are under the control of artificial minds that were built 50,000 years ago. Minds that remember the war against the Devourers." Jake realized that they had awakened something much bigger than just one old ship. They had awakened the sleeping defenses of an ancient human empire. Defenses that had been waiting for 50,000 years for their creators to return. The hegemony fleet was about to discover that humans had been the dominant species in the galaxy long before any of the current alien civilizations had even developed spaceflight. And the ancient humans had built their defenses very well. As the first hegemony ships entered the outer edge of the asteroid field, they were met by weapons that had not been used in 50,000 years. Weapons that the galaxy had forgotten existed. The battle was about to begin and neither side knew how it would end. But Terra's Wrath was no longer sleeping, and neither were her sister ships. The hegemony battle fleet arrived at the asteroid field expecting to find one small human exploration ship. Instead, they found weapons that had been waiting in the darkness for 50,000 years. Captain Jake Morrison watched from the bridge of the Pathfinder as the ancient defenses came alive. Hidden gun platforms emerged from asteroids like sleeping giants waking up. The weapons they carried were unlike anything in the modern galaxy. They did not fire energy beams or missiles. They fired something that looked like liquid light. The first hegemony ship to enter the field was a heavy cruiser called the Dominant Will. It had shields that could stop any human weapon, but when the ancient guns fired their liquid light, the shields simply disappeared. The light passed through the hull like it was made of paper. The ship broke apart without any explosion. It just came apart, piece by piece, until nothing was left but floating metal. "What kind of weapons are those?" Pete Collins asked, staring at the screen. Dr. Lisa Grant was reading data from Terra's Wrath as fast as she could. The ancient records call them dissolution beams. They break the bonds between atoms. They can destroy anything made of matter. The hegemony fleet commander, Admiral Vex Corian, had fought in 100 battles. He had never seen weapons like these. His fleet of 50 capital ships and 200 escorts suddenly seemed very small. "All ships retreat to safe distance," he ordered. "Send a message to High Command. Tell them we need reinforcements, many reinforcements." But as his fleet pulled back, the ancient defenses did not stop activating. Across the asteroid field, more ships were waking up. Ships that dwarfed even the largest hegemony vessels. Terra's Wrath was not alone. She had sisters, and they were all coming online. On the Pathfinder, Jake received a communication from Admiral Kate Sullivan on Earth. Her face on the screen looked worried and excited at the same time. "Captain Morrison, we are getting reports from all over human space. Ancient sites are activating everywhere. But Captain, it is not just in human space. We are getting reports from hegemony worlds too. These ancient ships are everywhere." Jake felt his heart race. Everywhere? The ancient human empire was bigger than we thought. Much bigger. Captain Amy Foster is commanding a patrol near the hegemony core worlds. She found an entire fleet of ancient ships orbiting a planet that the aliens thought was their oldest colony. The ships are human and they are 50,000 years old. Lisa looked up from her station. Captain, that makes sense. I found more records in Terra's Wrath. The first human empire did not just control human space. It controlled most of the galaxy. The worlds that aliens think are their homeworlds were once human colonies. The implications were staggering. If the records were true, then every major alien civilization in the galaxy was living on worlds that humans had once ruled. No wonder the hegemony was afraid. Admiral Sullivan continued her report. Captain, the hegemony has declared all of humanity to be a galactic threat. They are mobilizing everything they have. Over 10,000 ships from 12 different species. They want to destroy us before we can activate more of the ancient technology. Jake looked at his crew. 10,000 ships was the largest fleet in galactic history. Admiral, do we have any way to fight a fleet that size? Maybe. Captain, I am sending you the technical data that Dr. Grant has been sending us. Our best scientists have been studying it. They think they can build new ships, using the ancient designs, but it will take time. Time we might not have. The communication ended and Jake turned to his crew. How long until the hegemony fleet returns? Based on their course, maybe 6 hours, the communications officer replied. But Captain, there are more ships coming. Long-range scanners show massive fleets moving from all over hegemony space. Pete was still working with the ancient ship's computers. Captain, I have been talking to Terra's Wrath's artificial intelligence. It has been asleep for 50,000 years, but it remembers everything. It wants to talk to you. Jake felt a chill. Talking to a computer that was older than human civilization was not something he had ever expected to do. Put it through. The main screen flickered, and a face appeared. It looked human, but its eyes held the weight of thousands of years. When it spoke, its voice was calm but sad. I am the consciousness of Terra's Wrath. I have been waiting for humans to return to the stars. You are my descendants, the children of those who sent me to sleep. Why were you sleeping? Jake asked. Because my creators chose to forget rather than become monsters. The first Terran Empire grew too powerful. We controlled most of the galaxy. We had technology that could create or destroy worlds. But power corrupts, even humans. We were becoming the very thing we once fought against. Lisa stepped forward. The Devourers. What were they? The ancient intelligence turned its gaze to her. The Devourers were not a species. They were what civilizations become when they grow too powerful. When technology advances too far and populations become too large, civilizations begin consuming entire star systems to fuel their growth. They become devourers of worlds. And the first human empire was becoming like that? Yes. Our leaders saw the signs. We were strip mining planets, consuming entire solar systems, treating other species as resources to be harvested. We were becoming exactly like the enemy we had once defeated. Jake felt sick. So what did you do? We chose to sacrifice our empire to save the galaxy. We scattered our people to primitive worlds and wiped their memories. We made ourselves forget our own history, but we also built safeguards. Ships like me, hidden throughout the galaxy, programmed to awaken if the galactic civilization ever again approached the devourer threshold. The implications hit Jake like a physical blow. You are saying that the current galactic civilization is approaching that threshold? Yes. The hegemony empire now controls most of the galaxy. They consume entire worlds for resources. They treat other species as subjects to be controlled. They are following the same path that leads to becoming devourers. Lisa was reading more. Data from the ship's computers. Captain, the ancient records show a cycle. Every 50,000 years, galactic civilization reaches this point. Each time it either transforms into devourers or it gets reset back to a primitive state. And which is happening now? The ancient intelligence answered. That depends on what choices are made in the next few days. The awakening of my fleet is not random. It is a response to the galactic civilization reaching the critical threshold. We can either help reset civilization again, or we can try to find a third option. What third option? We can try to guide civilization instead of destroying it, but that would require taking control of the galaxy. It would require humans to accept their role as the dominant species once again. Jake looked at his crew. They were all staring at him, waiting for his response. The weight of the entire galaxy's future seemed to rest on his shoulders. What happens if we refuse? Then the ancient reset protocol will activate automatically. Most galactic civilizations will be reduced to primitive states. Billions will die, but the galaxy will be saved from becoming a devourer swarm. The communications officer interrupted. Captain, the hegemony fleet is returning, but they are not alone. I am counting over 1,000 ships, and there are more coming. Jake looked at the screen showing the approaching fleet. In a few hours, the largest battle in galactic history would begin. On one side, the combined might of 12 alien civilizations. On the other side, ancient human ships that remembered when the galaxy was young. But the real question was not, who would win the battle? The real question was what would happen to galactic civilization afterward. Would it be guided to a better path, or would it be reset once again in an endless cycle of rise and fall? The ancient ships were awakening all across the galaxy, and with them the power to reshape the destiny of every living being in the known universe. The battle for human space began at dawn, Earth time. Over 10,000 hegemony ships faced less than 100 ancient human vessels. On paper, it should have been no contest. But the ancient ships had been built by a civilization that had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years. Captain Jake Morrison watched from the bridge of the Pathfinder as Terra's Wrath moved into position. The ancient ship was graceful despite its enormous size. It moved through space like a living thing, as if it was swimming through an ocean instead of flying through vacuum. Captain, Pete Collins called from his station. I am reading energy signatures from Terra's Wrath that I have never seen before. The ship is not just powering up weapons. It is doing something to space itself. Before Jake could ask what he meant, the ancient ship disappeared. One moment it was there, the next moment it was gone. Then it reappeared behind the hegemony fleet, hundreds of thousands of miles away. How did it do that? Jake asked. Dr. Lisa Grant was studying the readings. The ancient records mentioned something called space folding. They could move instantly from one place to another without traveling through the space in between. The hegemony fleet tried to turn to face Terra's Wrath, but the ancient ship was already moving again. It appeared in 3 different places at once, as if there were multiple copies of it. Each copy fired its dissolution beams, and 3 hegemony ships simply came apart. Admiral Vex Corian, commanding the hegemony fleet, had never seen anything like it. His ships could not hit targets that could be anywhere at any time. His weapons could not damage hulls that seemed to exist partially outside normal space. All ships, spread out, he ordered. Use quantum torpedoes. If we cannot hit them directly, we will hit the space around them. The hegemony fleet fired thousands of their most powerful weapons. Space lit up with explosions that could be seen from distant star systems. But when the light faded, the ancient ships were still there, completely undamaged. Captain Amy Foster was leading a small human fleet near the galactic core. She had been given command of 3 ancient ships that had awakened in her sector. Unlike Terra's Wrath, these ships had human crews working alongside their ancient artificial intelligences. This is incredible, she said to her crew. These ships respond to our thoughts. I think about where I want to go, and the ship takes me there. I think about what I want to attack, and the weapons fire automatically. Her ship, which she had named Terran Legacy, was fighting 50 hegemony vessels at once. The ancient ship's artificial intelligence was teaching her crew how to use weapons that had been old when the pyramids were new. Captain Foster, her weapons, officer said. The ship is showing me targeting solutions that I never would have thought of. It knows exactly where every enemy ship will be before they get there. But as Amy fought her battle, she began to notice something disturbing. Every time a hegemony ship was destroyed, every time an alien died, the ancient ship's artificial intelligence recorded it. The ship was keeping score, And it was not just counting military casualties. Lieutenant Colonel Nina Hayes was fighting a ground battle on a contested world. Hegemony forces had landed troops to capture an ancient installation, but they found human soldiers defending it. Nina had been fighting aliens for hours when she noticed something strange about their behavior. "They are not trying to kill us," she reported to her commander. "They are trying to capture the installation without damaging it. They are more afraid of the ancient technology than they are of us." Nina captured a wounded hegemony soldier, a reptilian creature from the species called the Vex. As she treated his wounds, he spoke to her in broken human. "You do not understand," he said. "Your ancient ships, they are the sleeping terror. Our oldest records speak of them. We have been waiting for 50,000 years for them to wake up. What are you talking about? Your ancestors, they ruled the galaxy before any of our species learned to use fire. They had power beyond imagination. Then one day they disappeared. Our ancestors thought they were safe. But the old records warned that the sleeping terror would return when the galaxy was in danger." Nina felt a chill. Danger from what? From us. From what we were becoming. The records say that civilizations that grow too powerful become devourers of worlds. Your ancestors saw this happening to themselves and chose to sleep rather than destroy the galaxy. Now they wake because we are making the same mistakes. Back in space, the battle was turning into a massacre. The ancient ships were not just winning. They were demonstrating their superiority in ways that terrified the hegemony fleet. Ships that had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years were being destroyed like toys. But Captain Morrison was beginning to understand that this was not really a battle. It was a demonstration. The ancient ships were showing the galaxy what human power looked like when it was fully awakened. "Captain," Lisa said, studying the data from Terra's Wrath, "I found something in the ship's mission parameters. This battle is not about defeating the hegemony. It is about forcing them to make a choice." "What choice?" "Submit to human authority or face the consequences of continued resistance. The ancient protocols are very clear. Any civilization that threatens galactic stability must either accept guidance or be eliminated." Jake felt sick. Eliminated? The ancient ships have weapons that can destroy entire star systems, not just planets, entire solar systems. They could wipe out every major alien civilization in a matter of days. The communications officer looked up from his station. "Captain, I am receiving a transmission from the hegemony fleet. Admiral Corian wants to talk." Admiral Corian appeared on the screen. His reptilian features showed fear and desperation. "Captain Morrison, we need to talk. Not as enemies, but as representatives of species that want to survive." "I am listening." "Your ancient ships have made their point. We cannot fight technology that is 50,000 years ahead of ours. But Captain, if your people take control of the galaxy, what happens to the rest of us?" Jake looked at his crew. It was a fair question. What did happen to alien civilizations when humans regained their ancient power? "I do not know," Jake admitted. "The ancient intelligences say they want to guide galactic civilization, but I do not know what that means." "Captain, may I speak directly to one of your ancient intelligences?" Jake looked at Lisa, who nodded. She opened a communication channel. To Terra's Wrath, the ancient intelligence appeared on the screen. Admiral Corian took a step back when he saw it. Even through the communication system, the weight of 50,000 years was visible in its eyes. "I know your species, Admiral Corian," the ancient intelligence said. "Your people were subjects of the First Terran Empire. You were treated well. You had freedom to develop your own culture and technology, as long as you did not threaten galactic stability. And if we refuse to accept human authority again, then you will be treated as a threat to galactic stability, the same way we would treat any species that consumes worlds and enslaves others." Admiral Corian was quiet for a long moment. Finally, he spoke. "What are your terms?" "The hegemony empire will be dissolved. Each species will govern itself, but major decisions affecting galactic civilization will be made by humans. Expansion beyond current borders will require human approval. Any technology that could threaten galactic stability will be controlled by humans. And if we agree to this, then your species will be free to develop and grow within reasonable limits. You will be protected from external threats. You will have access to advanced technology when you are ready for it. Jake watched this conversation with growing horror. The ancient intelligence was not negotiating, it was explaining what was going to happen. The galaxy was about to be placed under human control, whether the aliens agreed or not. But as he listened, he began to understand something else. The ancient ships were not just weapons, they were guardians. They had been built to prevent any civilization, including humanity, from becoming a galactic threat. The question was whether modern humanity was wise enough to use this power responsibly, or whether they would repeat the mistakes of their ancestors. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of Terra's Wrath 3 days after the Great Battle. The ancient ship had accepted him as its captain, though he still did not fully understand why. Through the massive windows, he could see hundreds of ships from dozens of species. Former enemies now worked together to understand what had happened to the galaxy. Dr. Lisa Grant had not left the ship's archive room since the battle ended. She had been reading the deepest records of the ancient artificial intelligence, trying to understand the full truth about galactic history. What she found was both amazing and terrifying. "Captain," she called to Jake over the communication system, "you need to see this. I found the complete records of the Devourer Wars." Jake walked to the archive room. Lisa looked exhausted, but her eyes were bright with discovery. On the screen in front of her was a map of the galaxy, but it looked different from any map he had ever seen. "This is what the galaxy looked like 50,000 years ago," Lisa explained. "Every blue dot is a human world. Every red dot is a world controlled by the Devourers." Jake stared at the map. Most of the galaxy was red. Only a small section in what was now human space was blue. We were losing? Badly. The Devourers had consumed over 90% of the galaxy. They were not just destroying civilizations. They were consuming the energy of entire star systems. They were turning stars into fuel for their machines. How did we stop them? Lisa pulled up another file. We did not stop them. We made a deal with them. Jake felt cold. What kind of deal? The Devourers were not evil. They were just civilizations that had evolved beyond the need for individual worlds or even individual star systems. They consumed energy on a galactic scale because that was the only way they could survive. But they were still intelligent beings. They could be reasoned with. So what was the deal? The First Terran Empire agreed to reset galactic civilization every 50,000 years. In exchange, the Devourers would go to sleep between resets. They would not consume any more star systems until the next cycle began. Jake sat down heavily. You are saying that we are part of a cycle that has been going on for millions of years? Yes. Every 50,000 years, galactic civilization develops to the point where it either becomes Devourers or gets reset. The ancient human ships are the enforcement mechanism for this cycle. Pete Collins joined them in the archive room. He had been working with the ancient ship's engineering systems, trying to understand how they worked. Captain, I have been talking to the ship's artificial intelligence about the technology. It is not just advanced. It is impossible. What do you mean? The ship's power source draws energy from dimensions that should not exist. The weapons manipulate fundamental forces that our science says cannot be manipulated. This technology should not work according to everything we know about physics. Lisa nodded. That is because it is not entirely from our universe. The records show that the First Terran Empire made contact with beings from other dimensions. Beings that existed before our universe was created. They gave humans this technology in exchange for something. What did they want in exchange? They wanted humans to be the guardians of this galaxy, to prevent it from being consumed completely by the Devourer cycle. Other galaxies had been completely consumed, turned into nothing but energy sources for beings that had evolved beyond physical existence. Our galaxy was chosen to be different. Jake felt the weight of cosmic responsibility settling on his shoulders. So we are not just guardians of this galaxy. We are guardians for beings from other dimensions. Yes. And Captain, the cycle is not automatic. Each time it happens, the guardians have to make a choice. Reset civilization, or find another way. Admiral, Kate Sullivan's voice came over the communication system. Captain Morrison, we need you in the conference room. The representatives from all the major species are here. It is time to decide what happens next. Jake walked to the conference room of Terra's Wrath. The room was enormous, designed to hold representatives from hundreds of species. Today it held the leaders of the 12 species that had made up the Hegemony Empire, plus representatives from dozens of smaller civilizations. Admiral Vex Corian was there representing the Vex Republic. Queen Zara of the Aquatic Domains sat in a tank of water. The hive mind of the collective spoke through a dozen identical bodies. All of them looked at Jake with mixtures of fear, respect, and hope. Captain Morrison, Admiral Corian said, we have been discussing the situation. We understand that humanity has the power to reset galactic civilization. We also understand that this has happened before, but we want to propose something different. What do you propose? Queen Zara spoke, her voice translated through the water in her tank. We propose that instead of resetting civilization, we work together to find a better way. We have seen what happens when civilizations try to rule the galaxy alone. It always leads to the same result. But what if we tried something that has never been tried before? What? The collective spoke with their dozen voices in perfect harmony. What if we shared the responsibility? What if humans did not rule the galaxy but guided it? What if all species worked together to prevent any single civilization from becoming too powerful? Jake looked around the room. These were beings whose ancestors had been subjects of the First Terran Empire. They had spent 50,000 years building their own civilizations, only to discover that they were part of a cycle they had never known existed. The ancient protocols are very clear, Jake said. When galactic civilization reaches the critical threshold, it must either be reset or controlled. There is no third option. But Captain, Admiral Corian said, the protocols were written 50,000 years ago. Maybe it is time to write new protocols. Lisa's voice came over the communication system from the archive room. Captain, I found something else in the records. The ancient protocols can be changed, but only by unanimous agreement of all the ancient artificial intelligences. How many ancient intelligences are there? Thousands. Every ancient ship has one. They are all connected to each other through a network that spans the galaxy. They are already discussing the proposal. Jake felt a moment of hope. Maybe there was a way to break the cycle without destroying galactic civilization. But then Terra's Wrath's artificial intelligence spoke. Its voice filled the conference room, and every being present felt the weight of 50,000 years of experience. The proposal has been considered, the ancient intelligence said. It has been rejected. Jake's heart sank. Why? Because it has been tried before. Not in this galaxy, but in others. Every time, the result is the same. Civilizations promise to work together, but eventually they compete for resources and power. The cycle always continues. So what happens now? Now, humanity must choose. Accept the role of galactic guardians, or allow the reset to proceed. There is no other option. Jake looked around the room at the representatives of dozens of species. All of them were waiting for his answer. The decision that would determine the fate of trillions of beings across the galaxy. If we accept the role of guardians, what does that mean exactly? It means that humans will patrol the galaxy for the next 50,000 years. You will prevent any species from developing technology that could threaten galactic stability. You will stop wars before they become too destructive. You will guide civilizations away from the path that leads to becoming devourers. And if any species refuses to accept human guidance, then they will be treated as a threat and dealt with accordingly. Jake closed his eyes. He thought about his crew, about humanity, about the billions of beings whose futures depended on his decision. Finally, he opened his eyes and spoke. We accept the responsibility. The ancient intelligence was quiet for a moment. Then it spoke again. The protocols have been updated. Humanity is now officially the guardian species of this galaxy. The ancient ships will serve as your tools, but the responsibility is yours. 5 years later, Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of Terra's Wrath, now officially designated as the flagship of the Galactic Defense Force. Through the windows, he could see patrol ships from dozens of species working together to keep the peace. It was not the future that anyone had expected. Humans did not rule the galaxy like ancient emperors. Instead, they served as guides and protectors, helping other species develop safely while preventing any single civilization from becoming too powerful. The ancient ships continued their eternal patrol, crewed by humans who understood that their power existed not to dominate but to preserve. And in the deepest vaults of Terra's wrath, other protocols waited, defenses against threats that had not yet emerged from the darkness between the stars. The cycle had been broken, but the vigil would continue forever.